Season 2, Episode 1 of the Bithell Games Podcast. I'm Alexander Slawinski.
And I am Mike Bithell. I've come back from the break with a beard. It's a new season. It's very exciting.
Each week we talk games, what it's like to make games, and the random stuff we don't generally find time to talk about because we are playing and or making games. Previously on the Bithell Games Podcast. If you've missed the first year of this show, not a big deal. It was all character development anyway.
It wasn't great, to be honest. I think they've done well there.
We were working things out. We were trying to figure things out. But let's get you up to speed. So, see, Mike, say hi, Mike.
Hi, Mike.
Mike is a game designer. He made a game called Thomas Was Alone, which has sold about 2 million units.
Is it really up to that? Wow!
It's either creeping on it or it's quietly past it.
Wow.
We followed that up. He followed that up by making Volume. That's where I come in. Hi, I'm Alexander, and I handle the business side of things. In 2016, we launched a VR expansion to Volume for PlayStation VR called Coda, and did an original game called Earthshape for Google's Daydream. We also hired 2 people. One was Nick Tringali, who is currently working on additional content for Earthshape, and the other is Mike Futter, who is working on a special project we plan on announcing in due time. The only other thread from last year that isn't tied up yet is I'm moving to England, but that goes with the big arc for 2017, which is the creation of our next game.
The starting of the creation of the next game.
Correct. The starting of the
it's
creation.
It's important to caveat that.
Yeah. Which, there we are. You're all caught up now.
They're up to speed. They've got this.
So if you're just joining us now, there you go. You got it all. You got it all wrapped up nicely for you. Mike, what are you playing?
I've been mainly playing Lego Dimensions. We're at it's the second. Well, no, it's like the 4th or 5th wave, but like the big new stuff got updated. I think just before Christmas. For those who missed it last year, me and my girlfriend got very, very, very into Lego Dimensions. I think we own most of what's come out with Lego Dimensions. And yeah, we treated ourselves over Christmas to 2 sets. The Mission Impossible pack, because we're both Mission Impossible fans, and the Fantastic Beasts pack, because, well, actually we both like Fantastic Beasts as well, so there you go. But yeah, it's good. It's on the same path as the original games, but it feels like a very confident studio at this point, which is fun.
It's the only Toys to Life series that did better this year than it did previously. Lego Dimensions sales actually went up.
I can buy it, and I think they're being really clever actually with the with what they're doing with the new stuff. Mission Impossible, if you've played the old Lego Dimensions sets, Mission Impossible very much like kind of the Doctor Who set. You know, decent amount of content, few levels. Lots of great jokes if you're a Tom Cruise or Mission Impossible fan. Very witty in places.
Does Lego Tom Cruise run a lot?
He runs all the time.
Yeah.
He also because it's based on the original Mission Impossible movie.
The fish tank one.
The fish tank one. The fish tank level is a level. But the opening scene where Voight gets the air stewardess comes up and says, would you care to watch the cinema of, I can't remember where it is, it's Sweden or something, right?
Mm-hmm.
He puts the tape in and it plays volleyball, Tom Cruise playing volleyball from Top Gun. So it's just stuff like that, which is quite fun. It's nice little references, nice little nods. But what's really impressed me actually is the Fantastic Beasts set. So that's I think that was about 30 quid, and that is a Lego set. So you rebuild the base station, the base unit, all that gubbins that you built the first time around. You take that off and you build a new kind of Fantastic Beasts style model around it. And then we've started playing it, and it looks like it's significant. Like it's got its own little open world. It basically feels like playing a standalone Lego game. It's got several levels, several environments. Assuming they keep the pace of what they're doing right now, it feels like it's going to be a good kind of 6-7 hour experience. So that one feels like great value, feels really good. And the Lego Batman movie's getting its own one like that, which I'm super excited about as a Batman fan.
So as someone who has enjoyed the Lego Dimensions series,
too much, I've enjoyed it too much.
What is the one set, other than obviously one of the starter pack, which you have to have, but what is the one set that you would say really brings it all together. Like, it has the most content and the most interesting content.
I think a lot of it comes down to what you're into, but I'd say the two so far, I've not finished Fantastic Beasts, so I can't comment on that, but the two so far that I felt like I got my value out of was Doctor Who. If you're a Doctor Who fan, that is
the Doctor Who one
proper fan
massive.
service. It's massive. It's got all the Doctors in it. It's great. And I also really enjoyed the Portal one. I thought the Portal one actually mechanically used the set. You've got these kind of different zones on the board, so you've got basically portal puzzles that you're solving. Obviously it's not as full on as the full Portal game, but that one felt like, some really creative level design going on there. So those are the two. But to be honest, I think the genius of this as a concept is find the characters and the world that you're into and play those levels.
So I played Rise of the Tomb Raider finally. Okay,
what, on PlayStation?
Yes.
Okay.
So that's the sequel to the reboot, third reboot of the Lara Croft Tomb Raider franchise. One of the things is I really, really liked the psychiatrist scene that was part of the original teaser at E3 several years back.
I remember you mentioning that to me, actually. I think I remember you saying how excited you were by that scene, like they was acknowledging that stuff and felt like it was deep, right? Yeah.
I really liked that idea of after everything that happened in the original Tomb Raider, she needed to seek a little bit of professional help.
Because you would, right?
Because you would. And I thought that's a really interesting way to, maybe tell the story inside the story, like, a la like Dragon Age 2, unreliable narrators, that type of concept.
Yeah.
But other than that E3 trailer, it doesn't really that doesn't exist. Like she doesn't seek professional help. So the second one just kind of has her going with her. I mean, it's like daddy issues. She's following up on the work of her father and trying to prove that he wasn't unstable, and that seems to be the theme of this one, which frankly it's not as interesting. I'm there for Lara Croft. I'm not there for her dad. So I had wished they had gone more about explored everything that happened to her in the first one and kind of went along with that, because that seemed to be the theme. But it's still Tomb Raider, and it's great. And there were tombs in this one, so there were puzzles to explore. There were things to figure out. It all flowed really well. The pacing was good. It's a really great Tomb Raider experience. So if you haven't tried Rise of the Tomb Raider, yes. It's really good. What else have you been playing?
I've made a start on Batman Telltale Series to continue the Batman theme. I'm a sucker for Telltale games. I really enjoy them.
So which Batman is this? Like
this is definitely very much them doing their own thing.
Okay.
But in terms of where we are tonally, I don't think it's a coincidence that the logo is themed around the animated show. It's got a lot of that kind of it's that kind of tone. It's fun, but it's not. But it points to the darkness stuff. What I'm finding actually most interesting about it, and I am only a couple of episodes in, is its focus on Bruce Wayne, which is actually super interesting because obviously, in every other genre of video game, you do Batman because you want to punch people, you want to fly, you want to do adventures and fight gangsters and do all that stuff, right? But this game, because it's a Telltale game, and Telltale game's largely about conversations in rooms, it becomes the Bruce Wayne politics simulator. At least at the start. There's definitely action sequences. I don't want to sell them short on that. There are these Batman moments, but the stuff that I'm really drawn to is all this Bruce Wayne focused kind of content. You're navigating. In the first episode, you're hosting a party to get Harvey Dent elected. Spoilers, we know where that's going. And the Mafia shows up, and you have to kind of navigate how you're going to be involve how you're going to be talking to the mafia to keep them on side, because you need them to get Dent elected, but also you don't want to have your photograph taken with them, so how do you do that without slighting them? So there's all that kind of interesting intrigue, and that's very much leaning towards genres of TV and movie that I enjoy. I like my political dramas. I like that kind of stuff. So I think that's handled really well. Also, the thing that I'm most impressed by on like a story level, so I don't know if you know the story of what happened to Batman's parents. Have you ever seen any movies that have covered that scene?
They never bring it up in the movies.
They never bring it up, do they? So I mean, it's a cliche.
There should be something really dramatic with like pearls, like
yeah, the pearls individually dropping.
Yeah,
and what's brilliant is that clearly that was a conversation at Telltale, because you've got to do it, right? You've got to have that stuff in there.
they did it.
They do it, but what I love about it, and I'm not going to say any more about it because spoilers, but it's intrinsic to the plot, and they actually use that to kind of push the story of Bruce Wayne to a different direction. They play with the canon. They give that scene meaning. And for a scene that's so cliched, but you have to put in your Batman game, they handle it beautifully, and they make it absolutely necessary rather than feeling, as it normally does, like a waste of time. So on that's super impressive to me. Visually, I can't say I'm a massive fan of the Telltale look, the kind of the way they do their characters across their games. I'm not an enormous fan of that aesthetic, but
let's roll it back for a second there. Like, is it the same? Is it just starting to look old because they're still using the same tech from?
I don't think it looks old. I think they are updating stuff, and I think they obviously do lean into the kind of the comic booky visual, because that's their previous games have some of that. I mean more just kind of how I feel like there's a house style in terms of how they render characters' faces. I suspect to make them emote. I suspect that's an intentional choice, but there's almost like for me it looks a bit. I don't like it. Not a big fan. I don't think it's terrible, but it's. I would like to see them explore some other looks.
Yeah, I can always tell what a Double Fine game looks like just by just instantly.
Yeah, and you know what? Maybe there's an argument for that, right? Like we talk about the business and kind of
branding.
Relatability and branding. Like maybe there's a good reason that every Telltale game looks like a Telltale game, but part of me does want to see something a bit different. But it suits Batman and it works. I like their designs of the characters. It's good. I'm enjoying it. I picked it up over Christmas, and I've just been kind of fiddling with the episodes, and yeah, I'm looking forward to finishing it. I never finished Game of Thrones, actually. I need to go back and play that at some point.
So the other big game I've been playing is Dragon Quest Builders.
Oh, yes. You loved this, don't you? Well, you did at the start.
I did. Okay, so I did. It's good. It's Minecraft with a plot line, which is exactly what I need. Okay. And the game has done well, so clearly I'm not alone on this. The issue that I have with it is that every new world you go to, it restarts and you have to learn everything all over again, which is you get to.
When you say learn everything, do you mean like a skill tree, or
your recipes, like
okay.
You have to restart your city, like you don't get to take what you built in World 1 over to World 2.
Gotcha.
And it wouldn't be so jarring if every world didn't take what feels like 10 plus hours. Like, it takes forever, and they just keep throwing stuff at you. And there is a point so I'm on World 3 at this stage, and there's a point in World 1 and World 2 where you're just like, I want to be done here. I want to be done, get this over with. Because as you build your city, the city levels up, and you get more prizes for leveling up your city. Again, I love all of this. But it only levels up to like level 5, and then anything you do after that doesn't really matter. You don't get more people, you don't get more things. It's just once you hit that level cap, that's the end of it. So then all you're trying to do is get the story stuff done so you can move on to the next thing. But this is the classic balance sort of issue, is that I'm done with my building, which is the entire point of the game, because I enjoy the building portion of it way before I get done with your story content. So there's this massive gap of 5 hours, 6 hours maybe, where nothing new is happening and all I'm doing are fetch quests or battles.
Is that because you're over efficient, do you think? Are you gaming the system a bit and min-maxing and that kind of stuff?
No.
What do you think's knocking you off of that balance? Because presumably someone designed it to kind of coalesce, or do you think that is filler to kind of make the game feel longer and kind of keep you playing?
I do not feel it is balanced, because I don't feel that I'm doing anything out of the ordinary, and I'm certainly not doing anything out of the ordinary that anyone playing this game and enjoying themselves wouldn't be doing as well. They would every day be going out or fishing, collecting items, whatever, going back to the town before it becomes dark, building a couple things, just prettying up their town, going to sleep, rinse and repeat. And but it's so well done. This is the type of game that it's just I want the sequel so bad. I want it so bad, because everything that they're doing here is great. It's just not completely cleaned up yet. And
you're waiting for Assassin's Creed 2.
I am waiting for Assassin's Creed 2. And now it's time for what's going on at the studio. In celebration of season 2, everything is anew at the studio, really. I mean, we've got our people doing their things, but the big thing at the studio is we are working on starting our next game. Is that what we're...
let's use the word starting, because right now what we think is our next game, obviously, it could shift at some point.
So what we're talking about here is a prototype, yes. And we've sort of discussed prototypes on the show before, but now this prototype is the prototype for the next big thing, and it kind of has a different tone to it. We're examining it deeper. There's just an exploration of things. You keep showing it to different folks to really get a feel for it. So it's an action game. We can say that.
Let me tell you about our proprietary and awesome game mechanic that
TM,
yeah. We do need a buzzword for it, actually. At some point we have to invent that.
That's a problem for another day. So this prototype, the thing with the prototype is we are trying to figure out not what the game is from it, but how the game feels from it, right? What's the prototype supposed to be answering? What problem is it trying to solve?
Well, that to me is what's interesting about this prototype, is that it was mainly started to prove an idea. We had a very strong idea for a game, a world, a narrative, a thing we wanted to do. And I sat down and started playing. And I think about a week in, realized, no, this is something completely different. That's what's interesting, is it's one of those examples of a prototype started with a hypothesis, which is we've got something really clever in our heads. I've got a 10-page Google Doc, that expresses our genius on this topic. Let's go and make it just to check, just to prove that we're as clever as we think we are. And then you start building it and realize, oh, this is not the game we thought it was, in terms of its tone, in terms of how it feels to play. And since then, yes, it's been a case of exploring, that vein, working out how do we get the absolute best version of this new kind of feeling, this new kind of way of playing.
Because the original sort of hypothesis was this very methodical sort of
kind of dour as well. It was very very worthy.
and once you started prototyping, it's like, no, this is fun.
Yeah, that was the horrible moment where it's a weird thing to say, because obviously all video games should be fun, in my opinion. But like, you know, there was an idea in our heads which was a much more kind of, I guess, brooding kind of storytelling game that was also, you know, good and meaty and gamey to play. And then, yeah, through the act of actually making it, realised, no, this is too fun. The player's not going to want to be interrupted from this for our 20-minute cutscene, which expresses the relationship between these two characters. We're going to have to work out a way. There are games you play because they're fun games, and there are games you play to get to the next cutscene. Let's be completely honest. Like, there are different kinds of games out there. And I think our game feels right now actually like it's too good. It's too fun to be doing those to be doing that story. So for me, it's toning down how much storytelling I want to do, or changing the way that story is delivered to something that makes more sense for the game as it currently feels. And I think we're in a good place. I think it's hitting a good consistent tone now, which is cool.
So now, exploring the concept of a prototype.
Yeah.
This is an idea that we've now are testing it. It's feeling good. Now, what many folks out there may know is the terms prototype, vertical slice, alpha, beta, gold, launch.
Do we want to quickly recap for those who don't?
Sure, go ahead.
Prototype is coming up with an idea for a game and seeing if that core idea is fun. Vertical slice is where you make a fake level for your game. You basically try and complete a very small chunk of your game. You say, right, we're gonna. This is like if you played the final game, a 20-minute chunk of it. Alpha is when you've got a game to a point where everything's in. You can play it from beginning to end, but it's probably a bit ropey and buggy and messy in places. Beta should be pretty much there, although some things can still be tweaked and fiddled with just to make the game as good as it can be, and then you release it. Different people feel differently about those, though, so there
right, and there's
people who disagree with those definitions, which is fair.
There's a debate to have inside of there. Sure. But so when someone is presenting a prototype to, you know, their friends, and, you know, maybe they have publisher interest and they're starting to show it to publishers, what is sort of the line in your head between the prototype and the vertical slice?
To me, a vertical slice, you've made a lot more decisions. I think that's the big shift for me. So with a prototype, it's usually about proving a mechanic or working out how a mechanic feels. So for us, it's about a core, we said it's an action game, a core action moment, and is that working? Can I play that and have fun for 5 minutes? If I can, then we can start shifting that around, doing different things with it. It's the Halo refers to the 60 seconds of fun, right? And they just, that's what the game is. It's just repeating that idea of what an encounter is in Halo. And it's a similar thing with what we're doing, is can we make that fun, and then we can wrap a lot of depth around it and turn it into an experience that's actually going to work for a number of hours. For me, that makes sense. For a vertical slice, you've made many more decisions. You've locked in what are the mechanics, what's the story, what's the world look like, how does it play, how does it sound, how does it, all these things. And to me, I kind of feel like a vertical slice is something that you shouldn't do before there's a major collaborator involved, if it is a publisher or if it's a team, because ultimately those are decisions you're going to make with your colleagues. So for me, if we show this to publishers, I want them to see where we're at and then be involved in the process of developing what that game's going to be, and therefore the vertical slice will be influenced by them.
So for someone who doesn't have resources, for example, like for art or, to do that, they've worked at their prototype. They have, essentially mannequins on screen. They've got, like everything being very
gray box kind of world. Yeah.
How could they have a vertical slice that is just the Mannequin's gray box sort of feel, but all the, you know, their core ideas in there, it's definitely 10 minutes of gameplay, but it doesn't have final art assets. Would that still be a vertical slice, or are we in like weird different territory?
I think the key difference is intent. So the short version is no, that's not a vertical slice. But the key thing is intent. So a prototype is about testing and exploring an idea. It's jazz. You're just kind of experimenting. And we've had this with the prototype. It happened yesterday, right? Was a mechanic that multiple people who played the game were like, this should have this in it. Including me. Including you. And we put it in, and it sucked. Sucked bad.
It was not good.
It was not good. And there's no, you know, you don't know until you try. That's a prototype, though, is you're playing with things, you're putting things in, you're taking things out, you're trying to work out a general sense of what you're going to make.
But all of those conversations should be happening at this stage, right? That's not something that you're testing out a mechanic in alpha, right?
I mean, in theory, no. Post alpha, you should be firefighting. You should just be fixing what's there. I mean, but, you know, that said, you look at, say, Valve, for example, and how much they tweak ideas and fiddle with things. If you have the time and resources to do that, then I think there is an argument for being fluid with your production, but generally you don't get to you don't find many publishers who are into the idea.
Let's assume you're not making a percentage off of every sale on Steam.
Like, if you're not making a percentage of all the money ever made on PC games, yeah, it is a bit tougher. But people do it, and it's fair enough, and that's why a lot of indie games take so long, and arguably the games are probably better as a result of that. So who am I to say that's not the right way to do it? It's not how we do it, but fair enough. But the vertical slice, the key thing with the vertical slice is the reason you do a vertical slice, yes, it's to show other people what the final game's going to be, but the more important, I would say, reason for doing vertical slice is you're learning how you're going to make the final game, which means you're learning what the pipelines are for creating artwork. How long does it take Bob to turn Susan's concept art into a mesh before Clarice rigs up? I'm finding names out the top of my head right now. Like how long is that process? How does that work? Does it work? Are there problems that you can fix for all the other characters you have to do later on? And as I said, like, that is based on a lot of decisions in terms of what's the art style, what's the platform we're making this game for, what are the specific constraints and limitations. The other key thing that's really important, and is a piece of advice that one day I'm going to follow, hopefully on this project, is don't use the prototype code in the real game. It's a running joke for me and Nick Tringali, who's been on the show, friend of the show, and employee of the company, who is taking Earthshape and doing additional content. Is a lot of the core code for that game is contained in a file called prototype board. Because it was a 6-month project. And, you know, the prototype ended up growing into the final game. And, of course, got tweaked and fiddled with and fixed. But no, ideally, once the prototype is done, you should start from scratch, pretty much. You should start pretty fresh and start making that real version of the game. For lots of reasons. It's you know, because the prototype will have lots of mess in it. It will have lots of things that were put in to make a system that's now removed. Yeah, a great example of this is in terms of adding the mechanic that we added yesterday to see if it would work. I had to add a lot of different bits of code to the game to make it so that worked. Now we've decided to remove that mechanic. I'm going to switch it off. I'm going to flip a switch and just go, well, we're not going to let the player do that input, so that mechanic just doesn't exist anymore in the game. But all of that code's still sitting there, and even if I deleted the bits that I was aware of, there'd still be little bits of code hidden away. You know,
good thing we didn't call it hot coffee, eh?
It's one of those things where, and that would cause mess. You know, that's causing a slowdown. That's causing our game to run at 1% slower, which later on, when we're adding all the visual effects, is going to make our game look worse because we're going to have to hit our target frame rate. You know, so there's reasons you do that. So no, a vertical slice to me is not something that can happen organically out of the prototype. It's something that happens once a lot of decisions have been made, probably after full-on pre-production if you're doing it that way. On smaller budget games, you often don't do a vertical slice or pre-production. You kind of just go as you go. Volume was very much that way. There was no vertical slice of Volume ever. It was just, we're going to keep building this up until it's done. that's something that, unfortunately, on lower budget projects, you have to just muck in. You don't have the luxury of doing it that way. But hopefully on this one, we're going to be at a place where we can really get a vertical slice together that's awesome. And then, of course, the vertical slice then doubles up as something you can take and show at events and do demonstrations with, as long as it's representative of the game you're making in the end.
So first thing, I want to go back because I realize there is an entire generation now who doesn't know what hot coffee is. It was a bit of code that was shut off that had some adult content in it for a Grand Theft Auto game. And it was found and then exploited, but it was never part of the final...
It was mysteriously found, I believe, just as sales were waning on Grand Theft Auto, right? Just by coincidence.
Oh, look at you.
Just a coincidence.
Look at you creating conspiracy.
It's an absolute coincidence that sales were dropping and a code got entered that just made a whole part of the game open up that was controversial. It happens.
Coincidence.
Just happens. Coincidence. It happens.
But yeah, so what are the next... So we've got this prototype now. It's feeling good.
Thank you.
And we don't want to take it too much further because then it just starts getting messy, right? Like that's explain a little bit about that, because
so there's two sides to that. So the first is that it gets messy because, like I've been saying, that you add stuff and then you delete stuff and you end up leaving a trail of mess. And there's a certain point with a prototype where you've done that enough times that mess starts clogging up. And you start looking at the code and realizing that there's a, add 0.02 to this number and you have no idea why. But you can't change it, because if you do, something probably falls over elsewhere. And that's because you're prototyping, so you're making stuff in a messy way. You're not planning out code in the way that you would in a professional project. The design of the code is bad. So there's that, and we're definitely hitting that point. This prototype I've been working on now, I want to say for about maybe 3 weeks, something like that, 4 weeks maybe. That is the point, or it's probably a bit past the point where prototypes start to get a bit sluggish and messy, which can have an effect on performance. Our frame rate has dipped below the 60 FPS it was at, so I need to kind of fix some of that stuff up.
Unacceptable.
I think it is for our game. I think our game feels really good at 60 FPS, so we're going to push that back up, at least at the moment. Then the other thing is, you don't want to go too pretty with a prototype, because the closer to representative of a video game your prototype becomes, the more there's a chance that publishers and collaborators looking at it start to assume stuff that's in your prototype is how the game's going to look.
That's the really interesting part.
That's really
for
dangerous.
Me. Like that's where things get really interesting for me, because there's two sides of this, right? There is a publisher, wants to be part of the collaboration, and obviously a major publisher has resources that they can assist,
help out with stuff. Yeah.
So you don't want to go too far down the road of this is how it looks, and this is the not final art, but this is the way it looks, because that may not, you may lose a bunch of publishers because it doesn't fit their portfolio, which that's a conversation for another episode. But yeah, it doesn't fit their portfolio aesthetic. So you've kind of talked yourself out of a deal there, and then it gets complicated. The more you have in there, the harder it is to talk to these people, because you're not open to the entire forum. But then the other side of that is you might have your game may look really cool, so it is perfectly targeted for a very specific publisher, but then you're putting all your eggs in one basket, hoping that publisher says yes to you.
But it's more insidious than that. It's actually more messy. I'm fine with us defining an art style and then finding the people who want that and who don't. I quite like the honesty of that. I think that's probably best for everyone, that we make the game we want to make. I think that's always going to be how we do things. We make the games that we want to make. No, I actually mean more that thanks to things like Portal and Thomas Was Alone, And I've heard this story from people, is Thomas Was Alone, obviously rectangles, very simple aesthetic, is how a fair few 2D prototypes look, right? It's a rectangle jumping around doing stuff. And I've spoken to developers who've taken a prototype to a publisher and said, this is our mechanic, and it's been rectangles on the screen, and they've said, this is our mechanic, and we're going to work it through and develop it into its own game. And the publisher's turned around and gone, we don't really want that minimalist Thomas Was Alone look. The other example of this that comes up a lot is, thanks to games like Portal, kind of white, clean rooms became an aesthetic that was established for video games. And for obvious reasons, a lot of prototypes look a bit portally because they've got kind of white box rooms. Grey box is an industry slang term for the level you make, which is just grey boxes. Half-Life 2 popularized the orange box room because they all of their prototypes were like orange rectangles and squares, and they released some concept of that. So for a while, every developer, they were making orange levels to test out mechanics. But again, you'll show that to people and they'll be like, no, we don't really want a game that looks like Portal. And you have to then explain, well, no, and that's where concept art obviously is a really useful tool, because you can point to stuff and go, no, this is obviously going to look like this. This is the direction we're heading in. So yeah, it's a weird side effect of the broadening of the aesthetics of video games, that we do now have to explain that the game won't look like the prototype, that the prototype is about the mechanics and the feel and the action, but that we're going to be putting this aesthetic onto it later.
1, 2, 3. I want to thank you for reading the Freedom Mail again. Thank you for reading the Freedom Mail again.
Hi, Alexander and Mike. If you ever plan to make an episode dedicated to playtesting, maybe in the future, maybe when we get to the playtesting stage.
That would be good, right? Yeah.
I would love it if you could touch on these questions. We'll try to touch on them now, and then we'll up our game when we do the actual playtesting.
Yeah, that'd be good. That'd be a good episode, actually.
1, how early in development of your game do you start to playtest with people who didn't play your game?
For me, didn't play your game. Do you mean didn't make the game, I assume? I'm assuming he means like outside people.
Probably. He probably means that. This is from our friend Andre. So
yeah, I within weeks for me. I'll throw it in front of people. They're still friends. They're not real playtesters because they're buddies. They're going to lie to me if they hate it. But I'll tend to put it in front of like my girlfriend, my friends, people like that. I'll start showing bits of a prototype too within a couple of weeks, and putting the controller in their hands and seeing how they get on. For me, I've always been that way with stuff. I kind of don't think a design is proven until I've seen someone play it and get it. Like my design's very reactive. I make something, I put it in a player's hands, and then watch them fall over, and then fix those things, and then put it in front of a different player's hands. And that's Volume and Thomas Was Alone, both heavily playtested games. Earthshape less so because of kind of the limitations of working on very new technology. We couldn't quite do as much as we usually do, but we got there, and
we couldn't even talk about it. I mean,
no, we I did some playtesting with versions that weren't in VR, just of that core mechanic, just to see how people got on with it.
Yeah.
But obviously that's not ideal. That's one of the nice things about doing the mobile stuff, is that with Earthshape we're able to now fiddle with it post-release and tweak things, and we are to kind of hitting stuff that's coming up in reviews or in online discussion about the game.
Yeah, the next I was messing around with the next update for Earthshape yesterday, and it's just like the difference between it now and from launch. It's just, there's so much
wait till you play
more.
the next one. Wait till you play the next one. Yeah, it's coming along really well. Nick's doing a fantastic job with it.
So, question number 2: how many people usually playtest your game before it's released?
You
usually, I mean, this comes down to 2 things, right? Because as an independent developer, we usually utilize shows, right? Like
events are the big opportunity. Yeah, we don't do. I've been involved when I used to work in social games and AAA. I did used to do like the proper playtesting where you get a bunch of people in a room with like a one-way mirror.
Oh my god, that place in Manchester. So we were office hunting a while back, and there was a place that we were looking at Manchester, and they had access to a playtest room, like a full blown like one way mirror playtest room, and it was just like, I mean, oh my god, I wanted it so bad, but it's like, you know, for something like, you know, this next game, hopefully we can utilize. I want to do that stuff, because it's very tough as a designer. Like anyone who's seen the episodes of Silicon Valley where they do like focus testing, it's that, but with games. Like it's very the frustrations. I've never run into the room, but I have definitely sat behind that mirror crying. Like, why won't they click the button? It's flashing and pulsing and jumping up and down, you know. So yeah, that stuff. I'm genuinely terrified of being in that room with you when we do like play tests like that. I feel like I should hire like a masseuse for, like, you know, just someone standing behind you, just giving you like a nice back rub the entire time.
The key thing is to go into. I mean, when I was doing the point where it bothered me was an earlier stage in my career. The key thing is just knowing that you're absolutely wrong. Like, you go into playtests, you know stuff's broken. As long as you go in with the attitude that you're already wrong, and they're just going to help you work out how you're wrong, then it's a much more comfortable experience. But it is fun, and it's interesting going into playtests with people who've not done them before, because it is a very weird experience. So yeah, no, as you say though, as indies, you know, often we don't have the finances to like do that. Stuff's very expensive to get the room, to get the people in the room. It's all very there's a lot of very experienced professionals who run playtesting in order to get good data, good results.
You have to ask the right questions, because
that's a professional job. Yeah. That's you know, that's not something that you or I could do. That's something you need a professional to act as an intermediary with that stuff. So there's a lot of cost involved in doing it properly like that. So no, we do it like you say. We take the game to events. So both Volume and Thomas, I would say a few hundred people had played each of those games before they came out. And what we do is, me or whoever's showing the game at the event will stand with a notepad behind that person, and we will be noting down problems they're having. And it's not just bugs. It's like, did it take them longer to work that out than we thought it would? Did they get stuck here? Did they get frustrated? And just kind of taking all those notes and thinking about why they're feeling the way they're feeling. Not necessarily listening, because you will often get a lot of advice. You'll get a lot of feedback from people, especially at games events. Gamers love to tell you, you know, what they think of a game. And often that information is not super useful, because often or it's useful in a weird way because you're trying to understand what's the problem, not necessarily their advice. They'll give you advice. They'll give you, I think you should make the run faster. But often, as a designer, your job is to go, well, why do they feel they want the run faster? You know, is it the enemies are too fast and they're getting caught too frequently? Is it that the levels are too big, that they can't get to the fun stuff quickly enough? And you find yourself, and that's why you observe. You know, you don't just base it on feedback you get. You observe them playing and try and work out like where those problems are coming from and what their feeling is. But yeah, that's what we do. So we do that at events, and it's massively important, massively useful. And if you're someone listening to this who played Thomas or Volume at an event, you know, a couple of years before either of those games came out. Volume, I think we were showing it at events like 2 years before that game came out. If you played that first version, I imagine the experience is different when you pick up the final version to what you experienced with that first build. So we do listen to it. It's really useful.
3, how much time do you dedicate to a stage of development that includes playtesting and implementation of changes that are informed by feedback from your playtesters?
That one's tough, because that's where the alpha beta stuff comes in at the end.
I also think that depends on the scale of project again. Like,
does.
We would take a very different approach to this next game than you had then you had the opportunity to.
Yeah, Volume came in hot, right? Like, Volume didn't really have an alpha and beta. Like, Volume was finished about a week or two before it launched. Like, that game ran to the finish line. That's definitely not how we want to do future projects. So I would say that if you've got the budget to do it and to take your time and to do a proper alpha and beta, you should be done with your playtesting and your playtester feedback pre-alpha. Most of the playtesting data should be during full production and then stop. But yeah, if you're on a smaller budget or whatever, and if it's just you as a solo dev or whatever, maybe you can be implementing and changing things to a later stage in production. That really does, like you say, that comes down to scale of project.
it may be beneficial if you're at shows to bring a couple buddies along and have them watch and talk to people. I noticed this a lot from large, I mean, not massive companies, but just larger companies. If you go to PAX East or something along those lines, you know, the dev team is there and they're asking you like, hey, so what did you think? And they get, you know, you give your feedback, then they hand it off to another person who keeps a list, and then that information is analyzed. Like
absolutely, that's how we do it. Because a lot of the time as a solo dev at these events, you're doing press, you're off doing interviews and stuff. And yeah, I have, you know, 3 or 4 friends, often members of the team, who will just man every stand and just listen to that stuff. Like I say, and collate it. I have notepads and notepads of friends' notes on how awful my games are. It's great.
And I love question 4, the final question.
Sure.
Do you watch playtesters only in person, or you're also using some software to watch your playtesters play remotely?
So it's funny. That's what Twitch is now. That's what's really interesting about Twitch and how that's shifting things. Is with volume, Twitch wasn't quite there yet in terms of scale, but definitely is now. That I think, we'll be paying a lot of attention to Twitch. I suspect part of, and you see a lot of companies now with their process, they're releasing their games a little bit early to streamers. That would be interesting. That would be interesting to be able to watch people streaming our game, seeing both what they're doing and how the chat is responding to it. That would be an interesting data point, right? That would be an interesting thing to kind of draw from.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple ways of answering this one. Like, you know, do you watch playtesters only in person? Well, if you have an early access game, it's exactly what Mike is talking about. You know, you can watch your playtesters on Twitch, and you like the entire experience. Not only can you watch your playtesters, but you can watch the reaction of people like watching your playtesters. So you are getting the full...
Which in 2017 is super important, you know?
Yeah. Like, you're getting the full circle right there. And then on top of that, the you know, are you using some software to watch your playtest? I mean, now every app, you know, if you're talking about mobile games, like that's the entire purpose of mobile games at this point, is that there's analytics based in it that is that's telling home base like what is going on inside of the game, which
we do with Earthshape. Earthshape has some analytics stuff in there that we can query when we have a specific question.
Have we made tweaks because of the information?
Honestly, I know we've done it on
feedback. Like...
Well, yeah, I mean, I will always favor feedback. The problem with feedback is you only get feedback from a very small minority of the people playing the game. No, I don't think we've done too much work with that analytics. The key thing, though, to remember with analytics is you put it in before you need it, because you need that historical data in order to, you know, get value from it. So no, we've not looked at it, but it's sat there, it's waiting, it's accumulating. At the point where we need it, we'll have all that data from multiple updates of the game and multiple things going on. So yeah, we should probably actually have a look at that. But you're right, that stuff's there, and that stuff is increasingly something that people are putting into PC games and console games as well. It's not very hard to do. Super easy to get that stuff in. Unity even do their own kind of in-engine version now that's super easy to get on with.
But yeah, essentially, you know, for this next project, obviously we would like to use playtesters before the title is out. But playtesters, you know, Twitch streamers, all that stuff after a game is out is just as important nowadays because of the update cycle, and you know, whether you're just updating your game naturally or doing DLC or just getting an idea of what people are interested in. It's all connected in a social media environment. Thanks again, Andre, for that. If you have a burning question about games, game development, or just about the complexities of the universe, you can send those questions to us via contact@BithelGames.com. That's contact@BithelGames.com, through the YouTube comments of the show, or on Twitter by pinging @MikeBithell or @Slowinski. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Bithell Games Podcast. We can always use your support, so please provide reviews and 5 stars on iTunes, likes and subscribes on YouTube, and positive reinforcement on whatever other platforms you're hearing this show on whenever possible. This podcast was produced by Jonathan Downen. We'll be back next week. I'm Alexander Slowinski. Thanks again, and get in the last word, Mike.
Artificial.